Today we just really want to talk about what it is that you guys want to talk about. What are your questions around getting started in hardware? We got great folks assembled here on the panel. I'll let Greg actually kick it off as our moderator, but really want you guys to be engaged. We are live streaming to Tech Shop, Menlo Park, and Austin, so feel free to shout them out. Also, if you have questions going through, you can tweet #Founder Talk, and we'll be moderating those to also add those questions in as well. But without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started, and I'll let the panelists introduce themselves. Thank you, guys.
Hey, everybody. Can everybody hear me okay? I'm setting up the mics on the fly here. If we need to adjust the volume on anyone's mic, just let us know. So I'm Greg Comperic. I've been writing for TechCrunch since around 2008. Really, that's my bio. I've been writing for TechCrunch since 2008. So we're here today to talk about hardware, getting started on hardware, who should make your team, when do you raise money, from who, topics like that. I'm joined up here by 4 really fantastic people who represent everything from venture capital to crowdsourcing to forming your team to actually building and shipping hardware. So these guys are Nabil Hyatt, who is a venture partner at Spark Capital. He's led investments in hardware companies like Thaumic Labs and their crazy motion gesture wristband. Is that what you call it?
The Mayo.
The Mayo, yeah. He was previously the founder of the music game company Conduit Labs, which was acquired by Zynga. And before that, he was VP of product at Ambient Devices, which is a really early Internet of Things company. They sold devices everywhere from Radio Shack to MoMA. So also joined by Jessica Alter. She is the co-founder and CEO of Foundry Dating, which is an online network that helps entrepreneurs. Any better?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. All right, there we go. So to repeat what I've said, I'm Greg Comperic. Nabil Hyatt. Here's Jessica Alter. Anything like that, just shout it out at me. It's much easier than just sitting and bearing with it. Jessica Alter, she's the co-founder and CEO of Foundry Dating, which is an online network that helps entrepreneurs find their co-founders. Before that, she led business dev and was GM of platforms at Bebo before it got snatched up by AOL. We also have Josh Stansfield. He's the director of brand marketing at Incident Technologies. They're the guys that make the G-Tar. If you haven't heard of the G-Tar, it's kind of amazing. It's it's an electric guitar. You strap your smartphone into the body, and it lights up some LEDs and buttons on the fretboard, and it teaches you how to play the guitar. Is that an adequate?
Somewhat.
It's a digital, not electric. But I'm sorry. Digital. We also have Kate Drain. Kate is the hardware category lead at crowdsourcing site Indiegogo, which I assume most of you guys all know about. She leads business growth for the platform design and technology categories, and has helped companies like Misfit Wearables and Scanadu get funding through the crowd. So, this is a really big topic to cover in an hour. Hardware is huge, but we're going to try and cram it full of information. So just to kind of gauge who everyone in the audience is here, how many of you are considering starting a hardware company and haven't done it yet and want to?
Nice.
All right, excellent. How many of you are in the middle of working on your hardware company? You've already gotten rolling with it? Another third or so. And how many of you have hardware that's already out there on the shelves? It's already being sold? some of the 10 people.
You forced to talk about
Excellent. So it's that's a really good balance there. So it sounds like we're going to divvy this up into 3 topics: founding, funding, and production. And then at the end, we'll have about 15 minutes, maybe 20 minutes for Q&A from you guys. So if you come up with any questions, just hold them till the end, and hopefully we'll get as many as we can. So first topic is founding. And in each category, I want to start it off with just to jump right in there with the biggest unexpected challenge someone on the panel here has had in that respective topic. So the first one is founding. Does anybody have just a crazy, unexpected thing they've had whilst founding a company or watching others found companies? What's the biggest surprise you've seen? Sure.
Well, I don't know the biggest surprise I've had, but I obviously watch a lot of people start companies. And actually the biggest surprise for us in hardware, and I was just telling Nabil this before, is in hardware, there's actually way more engineers looking for partners than business people looking for partners. And in software, it's slightly opposite. Our network is 50% engineers no matter what. But in hardware, there are way more engineers than business people looking for partners. And I think, just sort of a higher barrier to entry for a business person by themselves. But it turns out that having someone, and I'm sure Josh can talk about this, having someone that's like, going to be the hustler, as we like to say, that will go to China, that will do all that stuff is insanely important. So it's been pretty interesting. Just watching those numbers has been pretty interesting.
Surprises. Again, this is kind of a macro thing, not a thing I've experienced personally, but I founded 4 startups along the way, some of which went well, some of which were a complete hit the wall and die situation, is one to happen. And I think once I started investing full time, one surprise was that finding that a lot of founders, I'd say the majority of founders started a company, especially in hardware, because they kind of wanted to start a hardware company, and not because they had a specific passion for that company. And it was because they hated where they were working, or they had a buddy and they wanted to start a project, or there are many ways to skin a cat, but at least we have found at Spark that, and I hope you have other data that will refute this, but we have found at Spark that down the road, 2 steps on the folks who actually make it, who do raise funding, either from the crowd or from venture or both, and get to scale. And I can almost look back at our portfolio and think about passion as a driver to success. So if you take a company like the Oculus Rift, the VR goggles that we're a lead investor in, that was not just, it was a person who had, Palmer Luckey, the founder, had been tinkering in hardware for years. He'd been fixing iPhones and doing a whole bunch of other tinkering stuff. But his founding of the company, that was a very specific passion about this one thing he wanted to exist in the world, and he was going to beat down any door in order to make sure that happened. And I think he gets a lot of, because he had that passion, it almost builds on itself. It's like having that initial inertia. All you want in an early startup is to get one more person to be a fan. And so if you start out with a super high level of passion, it's a lot easier to recruit and bring other people to believe in you. So that's something I was surprised to see, starting out.
And just to build on that one thing that I heard recently, I was talking with the VC, and just to build on that a little bit, that she's like, it's really important to be able to have that at least one of your founders to be a very strong, charismatic leader, someone who really can bring that passion, bring people in, and just that's something that this firm was something that they looked on, as a determinant of success. So I found that to be surprising.
I think the most surprising thing is how long everything takes. So we're very much that product driven. We started in a garage for 2 years before we went anywhere. Being product focused and being passionate like that definitely helps a lot, but it ends up meaning it take longer because you care so much about the product that maybe you don't think about the other things and actually pursue them aggressively until you wait a little while maybe to start doing those.
So is that just everything takes longer than you'd expect? Not
Everything does take longer.
And cost more.
Yeah, okay.
One thing for Nabil is, I agree you should be passionate about the idea, but one of the things we see, and this is not hardware specific, is that people are so attached to this idea that they haven't proven out, and they're maybe doing customer development, and they're committed to this idea. And what we really see is that, I can see people in the audience who have found their co-founders through founder dating, and they're on a completely different idea than they started with, which doesn't mean they're not passionate about the idea, but tinkering and working on side projects with people, you don't have to do it by yourself. I think there's this weird tension between finding the idea and finding the right people to work with, and I wouldn't serialize that.
Yeah, well, first of all, it's okay to quit your horrible job and start working on something, right? Go do that if you can. The characteristic I think we talk about when we think about founders, at least I talk about, is there's almost an emotional. The characteristic is strong ideas loosely held. It's this sense of being completely into something and having a hypothesis about the world that you're going to run at 100% until it's disproved, and then being able to say, nope, I didn't believe in that, I'm going to go that way. And in many other areas of life that might be considered schizophrenic or might get you, talking to a psychologist, but it's a very good founder trait to have.
No, I like that a lot. The one thing and this is like jumping a little bit ahead, but for crowdfunding, I was actually just saying this to Greg earlier. When I talk with people as they're developing their projects, and they're receptive to feedback, then I'm like, you are going to do well. Because that shows that you are receptive to other people. So a big part of crowdfunding is being able to listen to the crowd and to be able to adapt based on what you hear from them, and take it in to say, yes, this is legitimate, no, it's not legitimate. But just being able to take in information and actually be receptive to it, that's a really great sign that you're ready to lead and go start a company.
Okay, let's move into the very, very earliest days of starting a company. Before you got your idea, before you found anybody else and convinced them to join you, can you do it alone? This is kind of a question that it's like software and hardware, and everyone's always asking, do I need a co-founder? Do I need people with me on day one? Can you start a hardware company by yourself?
Yes.
Well, so I'm not we have a sole founder, Idan, who built the G-Tar originally, and he was founding it in his garage by himself for like 2 or 3 years before anyone came in. And even then it was really in a support capacity. Like I came out here to California to help him out, but he was doing, especially on the product side, you could do it. Now, you're gonna sleep an hour a night, you're not gonna be having a lot of free time to hang out with your friends, but it is possible. It's just stressful.
Yeah, I mean, anything's possible, but it's not advisable. Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really not good idea. I'm not trying to just evangelize it. I mean, there's a reason, to Nabil's point, that I spend 18 hours a day on what I spend 18 hours a day on. But I think finding a co-founder is amazing for 2 reasons. One, the body of knowledge that you don't know when you start a company is vast. I mean, it is vast. Never has the phrase, like, you don't know what you don't know, been more true. Like, you just assume whatever you think you don't know, multiply it by like 700,000. Like, you have no idea. And so part of that is like, makes up a skill set gap. And then the other part, which I know will sound touchy-feely to you, but anyone who's started a company or been early at a company in this room hopefully will not, is like, it is an emotional beatdown and roller coaster. And like, absorbing that impact all by yourself, it is possible. It is just extremely difficult. And it's not twice as hard, it's exponentially harder.
I agree. I think you could say that you can start it alone, but if you want to take it somewhere, you're definitely going to need support for that.
When do you know when to hire? When is that?
You don't.
I think firing is more important early. Because the truth is that it's going to be you, and you're going to have a bunch of coffee shop conversations with a bunch of your buddies, and you're trying to convince some dude to leave because you think he might be good, and you start working together for 3 weeks, and you realize he's not doing anything, and it's time to get rid of it. Like that's the early process. But going from 1 to 2 to 3 to 4 is more about culling. It's first of all, drafting not just for resume or expertise, but again for passion, because you've been running on passion for quite a while. And then as you're drafting each of those people, just knowing who to peel off. And I know that sounds kind of, very Carnage-like, but you can read any... Before we're involved. Read any narrative, whether it's Twitter or Tumblr or Facebook or any of those narratives of early startups where you can actually get a good year by year, month by month biography, and you will see that there are a ton of people that were left along the way. And I don't think that's because the CEO was a terrible person or was trying to cut people loose to preserve equity or anything like that. It was he's still trying to figure out what this company is going to be and what these people are good or not. And those things change so rapidly early in the company that even a very competent person can find themselves in a situation where they're 3 months in, they're like, actually this company doesn't need me. And or if they don't realize it, then you as a founder need to. So I think it's actually more about you're recruiting every minute of every day, and the thing you need to do is call.
Actually, like that. So when I got hired at Indigo, I've never told this story publicly, and I hope that I can. Oh my god! But when I was getting hired at Indiegogo, I had an interview with my CEO, with now Slava, the CEO of Indiegogo. It's the last interview, and so he's like, "Can I tell you something?" I was like, "Sure." He's like, "You seem like you're a great player." He's like a great auxiliary player. He's like someone who'd be great on any place on the field. And I was like, "This is a nice compliment. All right, thanks." And he's like, "But we're done hiring those." He's like, "We're hiring our first baseman. We're hiring our pitcher." And I was like, "Oh." And so he's like, "What do you have to say to that?" And you know, I said whatever. But to that point where you want to hire, like at the beginning, people do every single role. Like every person is doing biz dev, every person is doing like part of the product, and then you develop that you're like, "Oh, actually, we need someone who owns this world."
So speaking of people who own each world, as you're hiring people, specific to hardware, who do you need on that early team? What sorts of people do you need to hire in those early days? Be it engineers or designers, who are the most important people just universally that you need to hire?
I think you need to start with product people. Like you need whoever is there. I started out as sort of like a kind of a flexible marketing person, but we were a year and a half out before we had a product, and so I had to morph that substantially. You can't have people doing something that doesn't fit the timing of where you are in the company. So I think you need to start with that, but that's going to change, and eventually you'll always need those people, but you won't need them quite as much as when you're building it for the first time. And I think that the next, if you're doing hardware, the next big thing, you need people, whether internal or external, but you need people to work on quality and production and those kind of things, and think about those problems in a big way, maybe differently than the people who are building the product would naturally think about those problems.
How many people are at Incident now? How big is the team?
We have 8.
Okay.
Half of them here.
We just actually had this conversation, and I think Alfred is somewhere in the room, back waving. So we just sort of had this conversation about, like, as we're sort of changing how we look at hardware entrepreneurs or people interested in hardware. I think there's still the hacker, hustler, designer model. It's just that hacker is not just software, but it's usually someone who, or someone's, which is what makes it harder, who can do maybe mechanical, electrical, and then someone who can do software, usually the same. And then design is obviously super important depending on the product that you're building, but of late, I think that's been super, super important. Of all the hardware people that we see in the network, a huge number, like over 80%, are at least interested in like consumer devices, and I think that's when design is of the utmost importance because consumers' taste is so fickle. And then I really, really can't stress enough how much you need a hustler. And by that, all these people don't necessarily have to be separate people, right? But by that I mean, and I'm just constantly floored, as I talk to more and more hardware entrepreneurs about like understanding, like getting the first prototype built to like how do we get 100 units built to then like how do we go to China? And literally like Idan, their founder, is in China right now, right? And he probably spends how many months a year?
Months?
Total.
Probably 2.
Like,
Yeah.
2, probably?
Yeah, 2,
That might
3
be
months
way
a
out
year.
there.
Yeah. And I think you have to be prepared to find someone on the early team, once it's successful, who's gonna like go to China for weeks and months at a time.
I think that question's like a big one that a lot of hardware startups struggle with, because you can go get a consultant, you can pay a consultant, and there's a few, brand name consultants that help a lot of the big companies, crowdfunded and up, but they're going to charge you for $10,000 or $15,000 a month. They're going to charge you way more than,
And they don't care as much.
and they, I wouldn't say they don't care at all, but yeah, they can't possibly care as much as you do. You can go and try to find local people, Chinese people, or people from Hong Kong or Taiwan who will help with that too, who the consultants typically are, but that's also really difficult.
so we'll jump into this topic a little bit later, but are you saying that, so should companies just avoid consultants in the early days?
No, so we've seen some very, like Thalmic Optic is a good example, as a company that we led the A round in. They had a wonderful launch of what was really a video more than a product. At the point in time they released it, they didn't even have a fully working prototype. Now they do, it all works technically. At the time they built a really polished video. They didn't even put it on a crowdfunding site. It was just a TechCrunch article and a couple other articles on the web. They did about $3 million in revenue in the first 5-6 days of having this out on the internet. This was just a pre-order button on the website. And immediately it's like, well, okay, now we got to figure out how we're going to make this thing. And and yes, details. It's nice to start with the man though. And so the normal set of consultants, because there was some awareness, all swooped in. And we were able to do a pretty deep dive on each of them, on their backgrounds, and who they've been helping and what they've been doing. And ultimately, despite the fact that Thalmic raised a quite large A round, a $50 million VC A round, and it is going to have several people on the ground in Asia who are still using a consultant. And it's because they can bring a different thing to bear. And it's the same thing as you might have a design for a product, and you might think it's a good idea, and then you might take it to a couple friends who you think are respected designers and say, do you think this is a good idea? I want your feedback. That doesn't mean you're outsourcing your design, it means you're getting feedback. And that's the way I think about consultants. There's a difference between trying to weigh in on their expertise and giving up responsibility. And I think when you go over that line to giving up responsibility and saying, yeah, all my hardware design is handled by that dude, then I think that's when you come to traps, because they're not going to move as fast, they're not going to care as much, and you're only running, I sound like a broken record because of the questions being asked here, but you're only running on passion, and the people who don't care as much are never going to do that last little 2, 3, 4% that make the difference.
So, Kate, you and I had talked a little bit earlier just about vision, and it seems like because you're at Indiegogo, you're talking to so many different sorts of entrepreneurs. Do you ever get folks that are raising on Indiegogo that don't know where they want their company to go after that?
Yeah, it's interesting. So Indiegogo is an open platform, so there's no application, and the way that, and that's awesome, and so we think of a lot of times that it breaks down into 4 categories of entrepreneurs, like a garage entrepreneur who's like, oh, I'm making this in my basement, I want to make like 100 of them, or someone who is looking to make this into a company plus, or like a garage plus, or a real company, or like a real company. Like you don't have to, so we had Canonical raising money on us, so that they're a multinational corporation. But a lot of companies or a lot of campaigns, they don't necessarily know that what their step is next. They're like, do I want to continue being a garage entrepreneur? And then they might find huge success on Indiegogo, and then they wanted to raise $15,000. They raised $345,000, and now they went from just tooling in a tech shop to being like, holy crap, now we need to hire a bunch of people. We did not expect that. So if you take any advice, I would just recommend to know plan out some scenarios. If you have no money, if you raise some money through Indiegogo or crowdfunding, you raise a lot of money through Indiegogo or crowdfunding, how is that all going to play out?
In that case, is it possible to keep yourself from raising too much through crowdsourcing? Because a lot of people have gotten themselves in trouble founding and raising money and then find themselves in debt, $10 million worth to their, how do you prevent that?
So one way to do it from an actual logistical way is to set the perk level. So if you're like, we can only make 100 of these. Like we had a campaign recently, it was a $9 compatible or Arduino compatible board that they're like, okay, we know that we can't fulfill more than this, and we have a commitment to fulfillment. So we are going to limit the number because we can't make more than that.
So we're kind of moving into the funding topic here, that last question. So like the first one, does anybody have any funding stories, any crazy things that surprise them along the way in their funding quest?
You grow the camp, Josh.
Pause. I think this is a general thing, this isn't hardware specific or crowdfunding specific, but like anything, I think you think of it as like, oh, we're just going to go out and raise some money. Like, we're just going to go over to find a guy that's going to give us some money. But the time and the process that takes is so random and so time consuming. And so I think that it's very surprising to find out that it doesn't, you don't just get a term sheet and then they give you money. There's a lot more to that. I don't know, that's surprising though. That's not new.
It is. I think that's the way that most people think it works is you get the money and then you walk away and hopefully make them happy later.
But I think also that's actually true for crowdfunding, well, or somewhat true for crowdfunding, right? But we have a lot of, we have a core project on the site for co-founder day and discuss. And a lot of people talk about strategies for crowdfunding, etc. And I think the sort of, maybe not in this room, but the prevailing thought is like, oh, well, I'm just going to launch an Indiegogo campaign, and then we'll have like $100,000, and we'll be totally cool, and it'll be fine. And actually,
Viral video.
yeah, exactly. We'll just make a viral video. Yeah, totally. That's just like not how it works at all. And I think the people that are actually successful on crowdfunding campaigns that are raising, press levels amount of money, like millions of dollars or even over $50,000, really take a ton of time in planning and often actually hire consultants to help them. That's like, once you like do a little bit of research and find that out, you realize that that's actually super time consuming as well.
There's a lot of responsibility that comes when you get a ton of money from a crowdfunding thing. Like we have all these people to report to, first of all, but now that you have this money, we raised $350,000, which is not, we're not in the $1 million range, we're not in the New York Times because of it, but that's still a lot of money, and so people immediately assume that amount of money buys them a fully fledged company, 24-hour support and all these things, and you have to kind of figure out how to deliver that because they're not gonna be understanding if you don't give that to them. They expect you to act like a real company all of a sudden day one, and I think a lot of people who start projects on crowdfunding do so because maybe they don't think that they're ready for that. Yeah, we'll just do a Kickstarter, or we'll just do an Indiegogo campaign, and we'll figure it out. But people don't always support these projects ready to be that patient.
Okay, so you guys raised from both the crowd and from DC. Which one was more trouble?
Trouble? That's a loaded question. I would say that the sheer number of people we have, I'm just not counting these, but we have like a dozen investors. We probably have maybe around that. We have 900 plus Kickstarter backers. Just the sheer number of that is a lot more to deal with. There's a lot more variation in the types of personalities. You have to answer to a lot of different people. People have different questions. Some people don't care about the production delays or anything. They don't care about anything, but they really want to sit there and pepper you with questions about the technical stuff all day. And you have the same variety of investors, but having 900 of them makes it a lot more difficult, for sure.
I think you should, one thing when you're raising money is to realize who you're raising from and what their expectations are, being realistic about this. Like it might catch some people in this room by surprise to find that, not, especially since I'm a VC, that at Ambient Devices, a consumer hardware company that I started in the early 2000s, I had huge fights with my co-founders about raising VC, and that because I did not think we should. And I felt like we weren't at a stage where the company knew what it would do with that kind of money, and that we weren't actually even sure about whether this was a scalable proposition. And until we felt like there was market demand for it to be a scalable proposition, which is what a VC is investing in, then we were wasting our time. And I think it's easy to look at the general bucket of the world and say, who has money? Let me go talk to all of those people. The best thing that happens is maybe they just say no and you wasted a bunch of time. The worst thing that happens is they say yes. And then you're on the other side of something where you got a bunch of money and you're on the hook for something that maybe you weren't ready for and you actually didn't realize what you were signing up for. And so taking money from the right type of person or entity or organization for where your company is and what goals you're trying to achieve, it's not just money you're taking. So.
Did you end up raising right then? Or did you wait till later?
We continued to talk to VCs the whole time. It was a profitable company the whole way through. We were selling product about 6 or 8 weeks into the life of the company. We were just soldering boards in my buddy Ben's loft, and we're selling. So we raised about $1 million in angel over the course of the first 18 months, and then kind of were profitable, grew, and then actually about 3.5 years into the business, they did raise venture, and that was actually when I stepped up.
Hey, can I answer the surprising question? I know we moved back from it.
Yeah, sure.
I was really excited about it.
Back to the surprise.
Okay.
I got a good one.
No, from a surprising standpoint, so crowdfunding has the word funding in it, but I would definitely say out of all the benefits of crowdfunding, the money is the least important one of it. And so that, I think a lot of people find that surprising. I loved, when people understand that, it makes me very happy. that it's a piece of you're developing marketing collateral. You're developing a direct engagement platform, a direct engagement line with your most ardent supporters. And I had actually Walter from Xanadu, which is a does anyone watch Star Trek? Do you know what a tricorder is? Yes. Anyone? Yes. I like this. Yes. I like.
Does anybody else hear a bagpipe or something?
I think there's a turtle next door.
Oh, okay.
It's
It's
just
a better tech shop if you don't know Star Trek. It's probably
So Walter was developing a medical tricorder, and I talked with him, and he's like, when you go out looking for money, it's the last thing that you're gonna find. And I was like, dude, that is profound. I like you. And I think about that a lot when I talk with people, because when they understand that intrinsically it's having this opportunity to really connect with their audience and get real-time feedback, and having people basically pay for focus testing and focus group testing, that's where the value is, and that's how you're going to be better, because then you will really respect your audience, and you will really respect what they want, and you'll be able to deliver a better product.
You can't understate like the community building, community management aspect of running a campaign like that. That's massive.
I guess for Nabil, like my question for you is, would you at this point fund a hardware company that hadn't been able to raise crowdfunding?
I might be doing it tomorrow. The answer is yes. I think what as a firm, and this is, the real answer is every investor you're going to talk to has different criteria, and it is not, it is not a logical or liquid market. It is a completely set of illogical decisions that are going to match the person. For me, myself, and for Spark generally as an early stage venture capital fund, we tend to, as a group, be very, very product oriented. And so we all look first at product. So sometimes that means we invest in things where you have no idea what the market potential is going to be. For example, I think if you're a market-focused VC, it would be hard to do the Twitter deal relatively early when we did the Twitter deal, for instance. But that also means we really can't do things pre-product. Like, there are other firms who do a great business of backing, like, it's a serial entrepreneur, they're coming back at it again, they have a decent idea, they're like, I believe in you, you're in. And for us, we kind of need to know how the mouth is going to match the hand, if you don't mind the phrase. And so we invest as early as post-product, pre-launch.
But if there's like, I'm an entrepreneur in this room, I'm thinking about starting a company, a real company. I want to know, like, if I don't do a crowdfunding campaign, am I at a disadvantage, or would I be worse off if I tried a crowdfunding campaign and it didn't work?
I want to open up that question a little bit more. Can you tell us a little bit more about just the overall implications of crowdsourcing when somebody's approaching VC? I like the question earlier about if a crowdsourcing attempt fails, but what if it is wildly successful? Like, are you scared to get in that because they might be in over their head, or are there any other implications that are being scared of traction? But with something like the Oculus, who raised so much money, the stakes were much higher than if it was a small company who raised $200K from another VC and then failed and sputtered out. If Oculus sputters out, it's going to be a massive thing. So it's a much bigger failure.
Yeah, I mean, we tend to swing for very large outcomes no matter what. It's life is short, so why not swing big? So that's something we're very, very comfortable with. I would say there is certainly a risk. I was having a conversation with an entrepreneur about this yesterday, who has about 3,000, 4,000 people on a mailing list, is thinking about whether they should go out to Kickstarter, because right now they feel like they have a decent amount of organic momentum. And so they're worried if they go out to Kickstarter or Indiegogo, and suddenly what if they don't hit their target? And they do have this little mailing list for how many of those people will convert. They're trying to do all this math in their head. And mostly this is, to abstract a little bit, this is just a fear of failure cast in another light, right? This is just, should I launch the product and show it to users? What if they hate it? It is, should I bring in this person? What if they don't work out? It is a feel of failure in so many different directions. And all you can do, I think, as an entrepreneur is try and have enough self-awareness to feel like you're ready for that next step. And if you are, don't go into it half-assed, because go in as aggressively as you possibly can and make sure it's successful. Do whatever that initiative is, and then just do fewer initiatives to try and maximize success in that particular area. And so if it's Indiegogo, or it's raising a venture capital round, or it's getting the thing in manufacturing, try and stop everything else that you can possibly stop, and just focus on making that thing successful. And yeah, if it doesn't work, it will probably be a punch in the face, and it won't be the first or last time you're going to be punched in the face along the way.
To your earlier question, so I was at a meetup the other day, and I was talking to a founder who has a campaign right now. I won't say the name, but they're flailing. They have like 3 days left, and they're 5% or so, 10% of the way into their project. They make a very small, like a 3-inch little server. They make a tiny little server, and I think you have to think about, if you're going to go to crowdfunding, you have to think about, first of all, what you're making, and not every product you can crowdfund. Lots and lots and lots of products that are either just have a very small audience or a certain type of audience, they're not going to necessarily support that in that environment. And so they're experiencing that, and they're failing at their Kickstarter project, but they've gotten all these inbound requests. They've got OEMs that want to reach out to them. They've got people who want to buy thousands of these things, but they don't want to do it through Kickstarter. They want to set up a proper deal, and they want to buy these for a certain use. In this case especially, because this is something that most Kickstarter projects start out, you have to look at, all right, if I get 20 people to back this, my product will cost $500. If I get 100 people, it'll go down to $100. If I get 1,000 people, it'll be $20. And so the audience, or I should say like the market that can afford your product is going to change depending on how much traction it gets.
Do you know of any tools, or do you guys help folks get any guidance on Indiegogo about whether they will likely succeed or not, or whether they'll have a chance to succeed, or?
So when we talk with them, we'll ask them questions to get to that, to be like, okay, how many, like, what is your social media following? How many people are on your mailing list? Do you have, like, do you feel confident in reaching 30% of your goal within the first few days? Because typically campaigns raise their first 30% from their inner circle, people who are the most passionate about whatever you are building, creating, bringing into the world. And so it's those types of but to build off of that so failure, like what's nice about using a crowdfunding platform is that while you're like failing very publicly, you're learning a lot from it. So I've had people thank me for having a failed campaign because they're like, wow, we found out that people really don't like our product. And so like a guy was like, I've worked on this for 2 years, and I was so and then we met with all of these people, and no one liked it, and so now we don't have to make it. Like it's but because now they can go back and tweak it based on this market feedback, because they have all these people who have now given them to be like, actually, I'd like a lot more if you did X. I'm not going to give specifics, so you might be able to tell what it is. But like, if you had X, then we might like it more if you did this. And they were able to recalibrate and retool it.
Do you have examples of that? I've always been curious of like that, because I know that happens, but I guess we haven't seen like a big success story on their second attempt.
Yeah, that's a good point. I don't know if I've seen that.
Anybody?
Yeah, from the crowd.
I guess the one thing I would say about that is like there are cheaper and less involved ways to do customer development. I mean, like I would definitely do customer development before you go launch a crowdfunding campaign. I wouldn't look at crowdfunding. Yeah, they're to quote Seedling, like get out of the building. Like you can do some customer development like pretty quickly on your own and probably figure out that like maybe not that your crowdfunding campaign will work or not, but I wouldn't use that as your first or maybe second or third even. I would use it as like your 10th customer development.
Okay, so just to push back a little bit, so Canonical just launched a $32 million campaign on Indiegogo to raise money for the Ubuntu Edge, which was a smartphone, and they raised $13 million out of 32. And at the end of the day, they're like, this was amazing because we know that this was the market demand. And so now we will not be making this phone, and we're able to take that user feedback and turn it into something else. And so for them, they're like, this was the cheapest market development that we could have done. Like,
yeah, because that's
no
a big company then.
It's
so
true.
For them, that's the cheapest, but for two guys in the garage, I don't think it is.
What are the costs of?
Your time.
What you think?
which is the ultimate cost.
But if it's a month, I mean, I agree with you. There are lots of things you should do before that. But if you're having trouble finding a variety of people, like an audience to actually bounce that off of,
I just don't think. I think finding more people ain't that hard. Like, get in a car, drive a couple blocks, walk out into the street, grab a couple more people. And in fact, I've done, over the years, from social gaming to hardware, I've done user tests that are 5 guys. I've done user tests that are 30 people with like some person behind two-way class. I've done, Google AdWord A/B tests on keywords. I've done every manner of test, and especially early, the thing that I can tell you is the difference between the 5th or 6th person you talk to and the 30th is 0. Like, you're starting with an aperture that's so wide that honestly, after you've talked to 3 or 4 people, you have the answer. You can keep trying to talk to other people, but the truth is you've probably found the answer on, because it's just so low-hanging fruit. Unless you're in a really, really niche market, then talk to 2 or 3 people in that niche market, and guess what? You've got your answer.
I guess I'm talking about people who maybe have this really cool idea that they don't know if it's going to fit anywhere. They don't know where to look for those people, I guess, is what I'm talking about.
That's also where a hustler comes in. So a hustler is just someone who does stuff that maybe no one's done before, right? Like, there's always going to be this infinite number of things that you are dealing with that you probably never had to do before, and this person has a high, what I like to call FSO quotient, which is just figure shit out, right? And like, most things you probably haven't done before. Like, there's just no way. I think Kate's story about like auxiliary players, etc., where like you can rogue and you can do things even if you've never done them before, etc. Like, at the beginning, that is like what the hustler does. I joke and I say I take out the trash. I happen to do some important things, but also do things that no one else wants to do. No one else really wants to come and do all the customer interviews, so I go do it. Those are just things that like a hustler does. They just things that you're like, where would we find people? I don't know. We're gonna go figure it out.
Let me give some practical advice, because I ran across that type of situation, especially with MIT a lot. And at Media Lab we had a situation. I have a piece of technology. Maybe there's people in this room that have a piece of technology that they're not quite sure what the market is, so they don't know who to go talk to. Which is really if you know what your market is, then just go talk to a few people in that market, even if it's a small market. If you don't, then just start forming hypotheses and go test them, right? Hey, would this market work? I have a good example. So there was a couple guys at MIT who had a little band that went across and sensed your brainwaves, and they were thinking about this could be health and wellness. It could be it had a whiteboard, right? There's 40 ideas on a whiteboard. It can maybe help sports athletes be better sports athletes. It can maybe help you sleep better. They have a lot of different ideas of what it could be, and it's just test each one. It's not that hard, right? Like, you have a big bullet list. Be very deliberate. Start with the first one. Go find 5 people who have that problem. 3 people probably who have that problem. Ask if they're interested. And if no, don't keep beating down that door. Start moving down the rest of the list. And if you've gotten down 18 ideas and you still no all the way down, then it might just be a technology in search of a market that doesn't exist, which happens all the time too.
So it sounds like the overall message here is crowdsourcing, excellent, but talk to people first. Don't use crowdsourcing as step 1 and okay.
Or even step 2, I don't know.
I'm not even on step 2.
I think it's like, make sure that you have,
Kate's actually stat, which I don't want to glaze over because I think it's super interesting, like 30%, the first 30% of most things come from an inner circle, which means you have to have an inner circle, right? So you need your 30% to probably have a successful campaign. So I think that means that you've already gotten some customer development, you have fans, etc.
Yeah, and so and think of how that looks looking into practical application. So I think there's this one campaign that I think of when this comes to mind is when you look at a campaign and it's reached $0 or it's reached like $100. You as a consumer you think something of that. Like, so there is a campaign, and the minute that their press hit, the minute that they launched, that's when their press hit. That was when like TechCrunch covered it. That was when Gizmodo covered it. This was like 8 months ago, and they brought all of these eyeballs to an empty campaign. And I'm sure you can imagine what happened is that it just never took off. because people looked at it, they're like, could you not even get your mom to contribute to this campaign? What is happening? And so that, yeah.
Or you, like just. Yeah, how much self-funding is there to get at that first couple inches or the last couple inches even?
I have no idea. That's a great question. Does anyone, like, I don't.
Does it happen? You have to know if it happens.
It's funny, it's not something that we really keep track of, but I would imagine, like, the advice that I give people is to create a host committee where they are like, on day one, you will, like, you, my 30th closest friends and bestest friends in the whole world, mom, like, will you contribute on day one at 12:01 when we launch? And ensuring that you have that initial push and people who will show that, okay, yes, there's something here, please contribute.
Okay, so back to the topic of talking to people. When do people talk to you? And you as in the VC community at large. When can a hardware community approach you? Is it with a dream? Is it with a prototype? Is it when I have 20,000 orders locked in?
You can, yeah, I mean, you can start at any point. It's a question when you're asking for money. And of course, one of the things I don't like about the current culture of demo days and funding is that it often feels like a shotgun marriage is what you're implying instead of a real marriage. And, you know, a VC is not a passive investor. We get involved, we want to help out. I had the head of product for Oculus call me on Wednesday of last week and say, hey man, we're trying to work through an issue, can you come down on Friday? And like, you know, I got the first flight out on Friday morning and spent the whole day down there. Like we're not just tossing a couple bucks in, we're gonna get involved. And so it's very hard if you're asking us to get involved in 24 or 48 hours or immediately. It's better to start talking early, and it's better to start before you're looking for money. And frankly, that's a two-way street. There are a lot of VCs, I can tell you right now, in fact, most people who do anything for a living get really good at the first 60 seconds or something, or 60 minutes or something, right? I do this enough times and I give good panel, right? I have enough first meetings with you guys and I get good at first meetings. That means you haven't really gotten a chance to know me. And the best way to get to know any investor, partner, person you want to bring on board and hire is to go have the second, third, fourth, fifth meeting, get them drunk. Like, that's how you're going to get to know that person. So, because honestly, it's a 2 to 10 year relationship. And so you should talk at any point in time, but I would talk before you're raising and be very clear about that and saying, I'm just establishing relationships right now, I'm trying to figure out whether you're an idiot or not. And I would start there, and then I wouldn't actually raise until you really felt like you had something that had a propensity to scale for whatever milestone it is for you. Oh, can I mention one thing? It's not investors, but it's a related situation, which is just when you do have a successful crowdfunding campaign or you have a lot of buzz, one thing that will happen over and over again, I don't think there's anyone to questions, I'm just going to throw it in there, is you will have retailers call you. No one's ready for this. All the hardware guys are not ready for this. Best Buy calls, and you're like, Best Buy's calling me, like they're interested. This is great. I could be in Radio Shack calls you, and we got a whole division. We care about startups now, and so forth. And the point of me saying this is just that just because they might be in love with you doesn't mean you're in love with them, and you may very well not be ready. For them to go back to the crowdfunding thing, it's just that A, they're not in love with you, but B, that even if they run your product in 1 or 2 stores, that is a situation where failure will really hurt you. You can't go back. And so you being absolutely sure, I don't know if it's your 30% number of your sales when you first go out to Best Buy being in the bag, but you better be sure before you even do your retail tests, because you won't be able to come back a year later.
I would just say, as a former BD person, like, be really careful about tire kickers. That includes investors, that includes people who want to do BD deals with you, etc. Tire kickers, if it's not obvious, are people who are just kicking your tires and they are never going to actually do the deal or never going to start your car or whatever.
How do you tell the difference?
Well, as I like to say, a fast no is better than a long maybe. So you have to have some sense of urgency. And I think someone asked me before, like, well, what does it cost? It costs your time. You are on a clock. Like, every startup is on a clock. So big box retailers just don't have a lot of urgency, big companies. So it takes a long time to do even what seems like simple deals. And the question is like, is that the best use of your time at that moment? And that's like what I think you should always be asking yourself. And it's hard. And I can understand, I mean, I can only imagine like you've been working on something in your garage for 2 years and then Best Buy calls, like, it's like the heavens have opened up. But, you know, I think in general, like be aware of tire kickers. That's like people who even for co-founders, people who you're meeting with who never want to start a side project, who never actually want to do work with you, right? Like before you actually call yourself co-founders, you actually have to work together. You have to do a side project together. Investors who are taking a long time. One way that you can tell about investors, by the way, is ask other people, because I think people don't do that enough. And other entrepreneurs will tell you, even if it's subtly.
Okay. So we are starting to actually run short on time here, but we've got one whole other topic that I want to jump into, and that's production. So, same as the last two. Any gigantic production surprises?
I've got a couple, because we made every manner of mistake.
All right, let's hear them.
Coming out of production early on. I mean, eventually worked out all the kinks, but you know, one surprise is, I think we were very surprised to find, this is with Ambient now, we were very surprised to find that we had this vision that we would build the first product in the US. Because, you know, we're like, well, made in USA. Two, I am a control freak, and so I can go to the manufacturing line, and I'm used to software where I can build the software and look at the code, and I want to be able to walk down the line and make sure that that person isn't messing up my product. And I might want to change something at 2 a.m. You know, that whole thing, so I can keep it closer. And we were surprised to find the decay of manufacturing in the United States. It's somewhat changed in the last 3 or 4 years, but you will find if you're doing anything outside of the absolute norm in terms of a product, that you might not be able to make 1,000 of your thing in the US, because there might not be anybody here who can do that. And I think we were very surprised by that. It's changing a little bit now, mostly because there are a couple of large-scale Asian manufacturers who are building small-scale US units in order to start production, you know, small production runs. Here in Santa Clara there's one, and there's a couple here, but it's still rare. The second one, briefly, is I think I didn't understand the depth to which Chinese manufacturing is specialized. And so it's one thing to say, hey, I'm making a kitchen appliance. Why not find somebody who does electronics in China? And that's not enough specificity. Those people probably don't know every bit of what needs to go into that kitchen appliance. You need to find somebody who builds kitchen appliances, and you probably need to find somebody who builds kitchen appliances specifically for the retailer that you have in mind. That was a trick that we eventually found, was by backing out of the retailer channel and just asking our retail partner at the time, which was Brookstone, hey, who are the 2 or 3 contract manufacturers who really would work for you? And that's actually how we found, after going through 3, 4, 5 different manufacturers, we found somebody who could actually build something to the quality level that we needed it. So I would recommend just trying to be, there's so much choice in China, trying to be as absolutely specific as possible. If the thing you like about your product a lot is that it has, you know, a nice torque feel when whatever you have turns, then find somebody who makes those things and like orient around that.
I all those things. So we started in Cupertino in a garage, and we made the first, I don't know, first like 6, 7 prototypes were handmade out of wood. The next ones were made out of handmade electronics. Everything was hand soldered, but the body was SLA from a local factory. And then we said, okay, well, first, I say this is a surprising thing. We were going to make the G-tire out of plastic. And so we went around and we shopped around all these plastic factories in the East Bay and the South Bay, and they gave us no bids. They wouldn't even quote us to make our product because it wasn't a medical device or a car device or some crazy high margin specialized thing that only they could make. And that was very surprising to us at first, because same thing, we wanted to have it made down the street, we wanted to control it. A thing that I think we've learned about China is making things anywhere outside of your home base, you have a lot less control over the process than you think. You have a lot of control over what goes out the door and what you show to people and what you expose. You're that editor, but you don't have total control over what gets you to that point. Until it goes to print, until it's done, you have a lot of variables that you have to manage.
Just one thing, so amongst the people that have actually shipped hardware in here, has anybody done it domestically successfully? What did you guys think? Just shout it.
Oh, we made a driver display unit for trains.
Okay. Was that hard? Was that particularly hard because you did it in the States, or?
Well, most of the components we did off the shelf, but the enclosure was made here. Sheet metal.
Okay. So you said most of the components were off the shelf, but the enclosure was made here?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, 3D printers. And the thing with that is that it's not like a toaster. It can't be easily replicated, hence the irony, but it can't be easily built in mass in China under certain circumstances. There are certain models or styles.
Okay.
So it will be. But
So it sounds like the overall message here is that if it's smaller scale, it's doable here in the States.
not just because it's smaller scale, but because it's
So
a
special.
unique new kind of niche product that's still trying to find its place.
Okay. Did everyone hear that?
Yep.
That was really good advice. Would you mind repeating it, Mike?
Yeah, I just said that 3D printers, which my company makes, can be made here because of
What's your company?
Type A machines. So we're next door in the back of the tech shop. We make 3D printers, and I feel personally that because it's not a toaster that's got a lot of variety and can be built in all of that variety in China right now because of the long history of the toaster. That's like bread. It's just not a toaster, but it will be eventually, and it will be built in mass in China, and it already is in certain circumstances, in certain cases. But
Thank you.
Can I add one other bit to that?
Sure.
So there's one company that I'm dating, I'm founder dating, who I think has had good success not looking at manufacturing as a well, I actually talk louder, right? Who's not looking at manufacturing as a monolithic process, right? So they go to China and they have a lot of the components manufactured there, and then they do a lot of the assembly at a lot of shops in the South Bay that have been there for 10, 20, 30 years. And these are a couple of guys who were at Palm and Rim and things like that, so they have good network in that way.
Definitely happening.
Yeah, so I think
and that's happening more and more.
yeah, and I think that's where a lot of the points where people want that control and where they want to do the burn-in tests and see things happening. I think you have a lot less value to add unless you're a production person, when it's coming off the assembly line, if you will, in China.
Okay, I've got one more question here before, because it's a nice short one before we move to audience Q&A. Just a quick yes or no, maybe a sentence or two. If you're doing production and even assembly in China, do you need someone on the ground in China? Or is it a matter of sending someone back and forth, or?
Well, from the companies that I've been working with, most of them do send people to China or send them to Vietnam, wherever those production houses are. That having a person there for weeks at a time, that's something to expect and to build in.
Yeah, same. I mean, in some capacity, they don't need to necessarily live there every day, but you're gonna have someone there a lot of the time.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, I totally agree. I think the first couple tranches should probably be longer because that person is just getting to know the market and the process as well. And so they got to get up the learning curve, and they should come home and, feel like, they're definitely going to be going back.
Yeah, I mean, this will be a theme for me tonight, but don't trust anybody who's not inside the circle, right? You gotta be there as much as humanly possible, even if it's frank. It doesn't have to be. One thing that I think people think is it's gotta be, me or my co-founder has gotta go. Sometimes it is bodies on the ground. Sometimes it's just get the junior guy who's really passionate and doesn't have any kids and is willing to move to China, but he can call you up at 2 o'clock in the morning and tell you when things are going awry, and he's showing up every single day. You'd be amazed at how different a contract manufacturer reacts when somebody's showing up every day to hang out. Whether they know anything at all or not. It changes behavior. I have literally seen it. I just had this happen 3 or 4 months ago. I had a buddy who had their, I will not say the name because their quality had dropped really far off very aggressively, and they were trying to figure out what was going on. They had these, contract manufacturing really useful for the last 2 or 3 years, and I just said, just send an intern over there for the next 2 weeks. And they did it, and it was amazing. So you should have, I don't think it's actually, I don't think you should send, so I'll disagree, I don't think you should send somebody over for 2 months a year. You should have somebody over all the time.
I will clarify, so we do have people that are there all the time, who live there, in addition to the people on our team who spent a couple months there.
Okay, so moving into audience Q&A. I saw a couple things that were tweeted at us. I didn't get a chance to get to them. So if you tweeted something to us, just come on up to the mic and hopefully get to ask your question. So we're gonna put the mic stand right over here. I'm gonna actually hand over my mic because we're running low on mics. So just come on up, make a line.
Make a quick question, right? Following up to that is like, what's the horror story about sending the wrong person to China? Does anyone have those? Of course you do, right?
Yeah, that's
Destroying all your contacts.
Yeah, his point was just you can also send the wrong person to China. I think most of the like wrong person stories that I know about are much more consulting-y, outsourcing, biz devy. It's the person selling snake oil to you about how they know China really well and they're going to go figure it out. I haven't heard problems, for instance, I mentioned the intern thing, but like I personally, maybe you did, I don't have personal horror stories of the junior guy eager to learn who just pisses off everybody and burns all your contacts. I do have the guy who says he knows China relatively well and he'll figure it all out for you and then disappears for 6 months. You didn't really even know him that well, and then like things go awry like that.
If there's questions, you want to come up? Yeah, you want to just come up to the mic?
Yeah. Sorry, you're kind of close to the stage, but the mic cord is short, so we're getting close.
So I have a question. I was speaking with a lawyer the other day about IP and patenting. And patenting is, of course, an issue with hardware. And he advised me to talk to no one about my idea, which is the exact opposite of customer development and actually getting feedback about your concept.
Yeah.
But there is an interesting question there of who do you want to talk to at the beginning? Do you want to tell the whole world about your idea before you even get on Kickstarter and Indiegogo?
Right.
When do you really want to open it up right at the beginning?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, even though I was raised by two lawyers, but I mean, their job is to be as like risk averse as possible, basically, and your job is to like tell them when to, and tell them when to back off. So I wouldn't like take all my advice from a lawyer, especially at the beginning. So we see this a lot because people are like, oh, I want to sign an NDA before I talk to like a potential co-founder. It's like, what? You don't even have a product. So we obviously don't make people tell anyone anything they don't want to tell them. It's like a personal conversation. But I mean, you sort of get what you give, is what I like to say. So if you're not giving them any information, like you're not going to get anything. And that includes like if you want customer feedback, or if you want a co-founder, or if you want to talk to an investor. Like if you're not giving them anything to get excited about, they're not going to get excited. They're not going to react. And especially if you don't have anything, I'm not saying like show your like patented designs and like all the ad stuff to them, but like talking to them about like the general idea of things. I don't want to like pat anyone, I'm not putting anyone down when I say like there's not that many new ideas. Maybe like manufacture it a little bit different, and you can get into that a little bit later when you're, a little bit further down the road in your dating relationship with whomever it is. But just like requiring sort of the NDA kind of thing before you talk to anyone, you're just not going to get very far.
Yeah, like just know what your secret sauce is, and then keep that. And because there is something, I imagine that there's something that's very secret and very, very proprietary to what you're doing, and recognizing that you're like, I'm not going to tell people, so this is for a software thing, but like tell people what your secret code is, that there's something similar probably for your hardware, so to be like, okay, I know what, I can tell the general idea, and then keep that proprietariness to yourself.
I would go a step further and say you can just say the secret sauce because they're probably not going to care anyway, and they probably can execute. The specific thing he's referring to, by the way, and I'm not a lawyer, so first don't take law advice, but he's talking about public disclosure, and in most places on the planet, you telling one other person is not public disclosure. You putting up a web page about it or asking this guy to write about it is public disclosure, but you talking to 3 or 4 people or trying to hire somebody, that's not generally considered public disclosure. So I would generally err on the side of trying to find any other human who cares about what you're doing than anything else.
Yeah.
I would just to echo that. I mean, like your biggest problem at the beginning is not going to be someone stealing your idea. That's just not your biggest problem. It's going to be getting someone interested.
back in the olden days, they trained us to do something called a business plan, which seems to have disappeared in the modern age of young entrepreneurs. And I'm actually a lawyer but now entrepreneur, and whatever happened to business plans? Do people developing hardware need them? Do you advise them to have a budget, a market strategy, a financial analysis, all those kinds of things that used to be important?
So I think the absolute no business plan model is a reaction to over business plan. And so it was this ridiculous situation where, you know, VCs would take two guys in a garage and say, I think your idea is good, where's your 45-page, you know, encyclopedia about what you're going to be building over the next 10 years. And the truth is that all of that was complete malarkey. It was wrong. It was wrong, fake. First, even if it was informed, it was wrong because you're going to change. And two, it was probably not informed, and so it wasn't smart at all. I've found for the amount of knowledge that anybody in an early stage company has, it can be boiled into a couple of slides or, frankly, 3 minutes of conversation. So it's not that they shouldn't be thinking about things like the total addressable market, what kind of people am I trying to sell this product to, i.e. demographics. Like, it's not that they shouldn't think about the points that you think about the business plan, how much money do you think it's going to take to make this thing, like, those things should exist. But I think it's false precision to try and write 40 pages about it.
It's good. I think it's good for two reasons. One, it forces you to think through like the major obstacles or, you know, areas that are important, and it's a little bit of discipline, so you can like give yourself a little bit of a plan, but you know, be careful not to stick too much to it, because what happened to business plans, honestly, is that things became a lot easier to do and iterate on much faster, and then you could create a business plan. So people are just like, let's not take 6 weeks to create a business plan, let's just try this. That's what happened.
Yeah, so I have a small business, it's called the Can Van, and we developed it in grad school, so we had to have a business plan for it because we developed it in grad school. And I remember one of our teaching assistants, again, I've never told this story, this is a weird one, but like, enjoy it. So one of our teaching assistants is like, oh, I love my business plan, I keep it on my desk and I look at it and I think about it. We're like, so for us, we're like, the minute that we basically started our, like we incorporated, we became our LLC, like our business plan was out the window. Like most everything that we had in there, none of it mattered, but from a discipline standpoint, that was awesome because we did have to think through like where were our first customers going to come through. But yeah, I always remember this woman to be like, what? Like I think about that when people talk about their business plans, and I was like, it just sits, is it sitting on your desk as something to actually strive for, but I do think that there's value to it, but it's not necessarily in the way that it probably once was.
By the way, if anybody has another question, come on up.
The other thing I would say is for hardware, it actually is important because like there's cost of, you know, per unit costs. Like it's not
material.
Yeah. So like it's not totally irrelevant.
There's a bit of a cue.
Hey everybody, so I wanted to ask how indicative of general success of the company is to do a crowdfunding campaign. Meaning, if you're successful in the crowdfunding campaign, is that indicative of success of the company? Or if you're not successful, is that going to basically kill the company? And what I mean by this is, I mean, you probably did it, or I mean, I'm guessing you did something like that, and you're with Indiegogo. So I wanted to understand what you guys think about how does that translate to success of the company, because crowdfunding has a very particular crowd, so I just wanted to understand that better.
I would say that's a really great point. For one is that you do generate at least that initial part of interest, and so if you are able to determine who it is that is the most excited about what you are doing and be able to tap into that and turn that enthusiasm into actual contributions, that's a good indicator of, again, like back to the hustling. However, it's like crowdfunding is not an end-all be-all because perhaps the like you're testing your messaging, that messaging it didn't stick. Or you're testing market segmentation, that market isn't on. So right now, actually, it came out of Tech Shop, there's a campaign called Theradome, and it's a hair growth regenerator that you wear, and they were like, our audience probably isn't on Indiegogo, you know? And so they did very targeted outreach for the people who, like, they like brought their audience to their camp, like they had it hosted on their own page. And so like they really hustled to get people there, and they succeeded. They've done very well. They've raised over $400,000. But again, they really knew their market, and they were able to tap into that and turn that into contributions. But there have been campaigns that haven't been successful, or that haven't been wildly successful. They're great companies. There have been campaigns that have been wildly successful and haven't necessarily been the best companies. But it's all a matter of how are you going to take this experience and then translate it into something, into the next step, like in recognizing that it's just one step on your journey as opposed to the end all be all.
Does a failed Kickstarter or crowdsourcing campaign, be a Kickstarter or Indiegogo, does it taint a company in your eyes?
I think if they're coming the day after it failed, that's probably bad timing on their part. And that said, you know, every company that you see that achieves massive success, that is, you know, now worth billions of dollars, has millions of fans and customers, all of them have had, to use the, you know, phrase you do, have been punched in the face along the way. And that might have been a failed, you know, Indiegogo campaign. That might have been a situation where their servers were down for several days and everyone thought this thing wasn't going to scale. It might have been I'm thinking of actually portfolio companies now. It may have been a situation where they had customer backlash to a certain feature, or felt like they jumped the shark, or they shouldn't have introduced advertising, or whatever. Like you're all, and what you see with companies that do really well. So the answer is no, of course. Like to see that it's like the best point for us to see in a founder is that they've actually been through a crucible, because what you see in those companies who've done really well is that they bury their dead very quickly and they double down on their successes very quickly. And the ability to do those two things is the difference between, first of all, you have to manufacture and create those situations, but no matter what, you're going to get punched in the face. How quickly you get back up again, how quickly you re-engender and get faith with your investors, your customers, your employees, don't forget that. That's whether you're going to be successful or not.
Scott, I think you were next.
How many VCs can I date at once? And while they're drunk, what qualities should I be looking for?
How many nights do you have a week?
Is that a question for me? No, actually
What
for
do you
you
do
as well.
tomorrow night?
You should date them all in parallel. Yeah, I think it's very important. My general trick for fundraising from VCs, which I've done over the years many times, was I do lots of very loose coffee meetings with people, but not fundraising. I do that. Actually, I've already done my pitch deck. Like, I've done my pitch deck, I've practiced it 100 times, but I'm not going to show you a PowerPoint presentation. We're just getting coffee. And during that coffee, I'll give you my pitch deck. I say it that, but I have a very structured thought process in my head. I'm not having a random conversation. You just think I'm having a random conversation. And I'm going to go through pretty much everything you go through in a business plan. I'm going to talk about the market, the problem I'm trying to solve, why I'm really passionate about it, how my co-founder's amazing, this horrible thing that happened last month that we worked through and now we're 10 times stronger because of it. Like, I'm going to go through that whole thing in that meeting and figure out whether you're lean in or lean out. Whether we're just going to hang out and that's fine, or whether you're like, I need to see you again. And you should be doing that with everybody. And then you call together the folks that you think you actually had a connection with, and then you really go through dating for all of this in parallel. Yeah.
Are there qualities I should be looking for in them, or services that they can provide?
It's going to depend a lot on what you're doing, right?
Yeah, I think it depends on what you think you need and care about. All I'd say is it really does start with, there's a lot of different pitches for different value adds that VCs have, and there's a movement towards value add VCs, which is mostly just trying to add bullets on the side of a box, is my personal opinion, when really it comes down to whether the product is any good or not. And that is our particular model. We think it's going to come down to your relationship with the investor. That's the person you're going to have to call in the middle of the night, who's going to be calling you, like, do you have a connection or not?
One really big thing, this is just general, actually not hardware, but it's not about the firm, it's about the partner.
Yeah.
Period. Like, you should not worry, like, oh, I'm getting money from Kleiner, like, but I don't really like the partner, then you're in trouble. because that's your only connection to them. No one else there cares about you really. And like Nabil was saying, someone called in last week on Wednesday, asked them to come down. Like that's your connection.
I was gonna say, like to your first question, as many as you want to, right? And I think that's right. You should definitely do it in parallel, but don't try to go and pitch it to every single person that you possibly can, because they talk to each other. And if you're going to go about it poorly, and you're going to try to, like you said, you're going to go date 30 VCs a month, and you're going to do a bad job of that, you're going to screw yourself over
That's actually really true.
in a bigger way. So, it's not horrible to date one or two if you're just learning how to do it. Because there's a science and an art.
So pitch to a bad person first, by the way. Yeah, you definitely should do that. I'm serious. Like you should have somebody who you know is a B player who you never actually raised money from, and you go to them first because you got to test on somebody. I think you should do that.
We actually had I'm not going to name it, we had a senior partner at a big value firm that never actually ever expected or wanted to get money from, but went to because we knew that we could talk to them and get honest feedback about how to do this kind of thing.
Or like a friend of a friend or something like that. Like, I'm seriously not pitching you.
Except they're kind of pitching.
Last question. Hi, I just have a very practical question regarding manufacturing. So first of all, how do you identify and approach potential manufacturing partners? And then what kind of criteria would you use to try and find the best partner for your manufacturing?
I'll touch on the first one. And it's an anecdotal story, but I heard Bunny speak at the Hardware Innovation Workshop last week, and he was saying that if you can't meet with the head of that manufacturing firm in China, then you shouldn't do business there because they're too big for you. And so I thought that was really great practical advice to say, like, if you can meet with the head of that manufacturing place in China, that's your partner. Like, that's the right size partner for you.
The only thing that seems a little different now versus, say, 6, 7, 8 years ago is that some of the larger, used to be that, like, I go, first time I went over to China, I'd go to China, I'd meet with, Flextronics and be like, we would love to talk to you as soon as you're ready to place your first 2 million unit order as a trial run for small companies. And those manufacturers seem to have gotten, now I haven't personally tried to get some manufactured this month, but have seemed to have gotten a lot better at actually shaping up for the startup ecosystem. There's a sponsor tonight, PCH, that is starting an incubator, is doing accelerator, is trying to do every single little tiny thing that they can to get into the ground floor, and they're not the only one. And so that doesn't, what we haven't seen, I think, is whether those people make really good partners early. So maybe the general rule of thumb should be that maybe they want to do business with you, but you don't want to do business with them. But the landscape's changing a little bit. My 2 tricks were just the same thing any hustler would do, which is like, I ask retailers that I want to sell my product to who are your best manufacturers, folks that have relationships, and I just went to products that were as similar as possible and asked who they had good relationships with and use that as an entree. And by the way, if they trust you or like you, then maybe you just got a referral too.
Also, that a lot of it is going there and having those conversations and meeting people. And to that point, like PCH has an accelerator now, but there's a lot of other accelerators that, for relatively low cost, if you know that you need to learn a lot about manufacturing, to go there and get 3 months on the ground in China, just meeting and talking to people, you're going to figure out a lot about how to go about that process that you probably can't figure out just by talking or reading something here,
Or a lot faster.
Yeah.
Okay, I think that is our panel. I think we're out of time. Before I hand over the mic, I just want to thank all of our panelists. I learned a lot. I hope you guys all learned a lot.
Really quickly, just want to also say thank you guys again. We are excited to sort of be a part of this community and continue to invest and learn from you guys and grow with you. I think we also, this Friday, we have a deadline. So for those of you who are looking to find co-founders, we are helping hardware folks do that. And we couldn't end a hardware event without a really quick 30-second demo. Mark here wants to show us something. He promised he'd be 30 seconds, and then we'll peace out.
Yep. Good evening, y'all. This is a 30% conversion efficiency solar electric panel. This was made in my garage using off-the-shelf 40% conversion efficiency multi-junction solar cells and a novel concentrating optic. We have a business model that's based on a California manufacturing strategy. We have a California Energy Commission grant. We think we can make this thing entirely in the Bay Area. We have a crowdfunding campaign coming up in like 3 months. We have fully functional prototypes. There's only 3 of us, and in the spirit of founder dating in 30 seconds, come talk to me if y'all are interested or want to get involved. Thank you.
No problem.